This is Batgirl, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 138 of the Cinema Geeks. I am one of your Cinema Geeks, OptimusSolo, and joining me today is MovieRevolt Dan.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad, and that is it for the Cinema Geeks this week. So Amanda is off doing her, I guess, networking duties as she's at that theater as we're recording, getting ready for a guest appearance on another podcast. And Matt's had a pretty busy week, so he's taking this one off too. So it's just Dan and myself. Dan, it's been a while since it was just the two of us on a Cinema Geeks record. Yeah,
it's been quite some time. Maybe the last time we did it was Tarantino retrospective.
Yeah,
way back when.
I think so. So Dan and I are here because we want to have an episode this week, and we thought, what better than to deal with the fact that we are in the middle of the Summer Blockbuster season. So, Dan, is it just me, or did that mean something more like a decade ago than it does now?
I think so, because I think back in the day, like you only got these blockbusters during the summer, but now the summer starts in April, and you also have really big franchise films in November and around Christmas. So it doesn't seem to be as packed as it once was. But I don't know if that's just my memory playing tricks on me.
Yeah, it seems like memories are a weird thing, but it seems like when I was a kid, I remember that there was the holiday season where you had movies coming out around Memorial Day, 4th of July, that type of, the summer blockbuster season, I guess. And then I remember that there was always, a handful of films that would come out, in the holiday season, like in the, Christmas, December, that time period, because I always remember family members trying to decide which movie they were going to go to, together at Christmases or Thanksgiving or somewhere around that line. So those were the two time periods that I remember as a kid that movies were talked about and were kind of in the, everybody's mind as far as which ones were being released during that time. And like you said, now it seems like it's 9-10 months out of the year. You know what I mean? And then you have you get that rush of award type films coming out in December, and then it seems like your only time off sometimes is January and maybe February. But even then, you might get a couple gems in there too nowadays. Basically,
yeah, I think there's some benefits, and there's some good things about the way it was, but I do, it's weird when we have a couple weeks per and you're like, wow, there's 2 weeks in a row, there's not one good summer movie coming out. It's kind of disappointing.
It's like wrestling. You go from only having WrestleMania and whatever SummerSlam, and then you go to the point where there's a pay-per-view every month.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the oversaturation or something. But I'm not complaining because I love going to see movies, so bring them all year round. I don't need months and months off in between it. Like you said, it's even hard enough when there's a couple weeks off where there's nothing good. So so why don't you tell them what we're going to be doing today and give them an idea of what they're about to listen to as we try to compete against each other in a way.
Yeah, so basically with the idea of summer and, the fact that there's a lot of movies we haven't gotten a chance to talk about, but we thought, thinking about those past days and what summers can be, we thought, what if we tried to craft our own kind of summer festival? I know for a lot of people in and around my area, for example, there's a lot of summer things going on, or they have movies playing in different parks and things of that nature. Drive-ins, which will have a number of movies playing. My local drive-in does a thing that's Dusk till Dawn, where it's 5 movies in a row that you watch from the moment the sun goes down until it comes up. And so we kind of took all of those ideas, and we're kind of basically trying to construct the ultimate summer list by looking at the main genres of sci-fi, fantasy, action-adventure, comedy, family, horror, thriller, and action, and I forget.
That's all 5.
That's all 5. I can count. So we're gonna basically pick a movie that represents each genre that's been released in the summertime from the 1970s, really when the summer season really began, until today. And we're gonna try to have the best representation we can and make the most exciting lineup, and then you'll have the opportunity to vote to see who actually picked the best lineup. Which one would you go to if you had the opportunity to go see Kevin's showcase or my showcase? which one would you be more likely to actually go to?
And I think it is kind of fitting because both summertime is number one, always known for summer blockbusters, but I think too, that is the time for festivals. You have a lot of different film festivals going on in the summer. I know just around my neck of the woods, we just had the Chicago Film Critics Festival. We're about to have the 70 millimeter film festival, at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. So it's a lot good times. Nice weather brings on festivals of all kinds, not just film related. So we're both basically creating our own little showcase, our own festival, and you get to choose which one you want to attend. And like I said, we only get one pick from each of those 5 genres, and we're covering, about a little over 40 to 50 years worth of films. So, Dan, before we get into the actual picks, how was this trying to narrow it down and come up with your possible selections, if I don't steal any of them?
Exactly. That's the key. It's challenging because in a way, by having more options, it makes it harder because, and you trying to want to get variety in there too, because you don't all pick from the same director or the same decade. And the idea is you're trying to appeal to the widest audience possible. So it does get difficult because and like I'll just do 5 Marvel movies, but then maybe that doesn't make the most sense. So because you can argue, I guess, some of them fit into different categories, but it's a lot harder when you try to just narrow it down by the end.
So. Who's going to go first, and what genre are we going to tackle first?
Why don't you go first, and you choose the genre, and then I'll go next round, and I'll choose the genre.
All right, sounds good. I'll go action adventure first. I think that's the one I have the least amount of options for some reason, which is very weird because it's summer blockbuster season. So that seems to be, action adventure like prime time. But I only have a couple on my list, so I'm going to go with that one first. And for my action adventure film, is there any question? How about a little film that came out in July of 1988? It was July 15th, 1988, the release of Die Hard into theaters. So for my action adventure, I don't know if it gets any better than Die Hard, so I have to get that one out of the way.
Interesting. That's funny because when you're saying that, it's the obvious choice and you talked about action adventure, I was like, oh, you're going to go with my choice because it's also from the 80s, but not from that year and from a different director. It's, to me, the ultimate action adventure film, and that is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Oh, nice. So it's got currently a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, obviously starring Harrison Ford and directed by Steven Spielberg. Like I said, to me, it's setting the bar of action adventure. It is such an amazing movie and still really holds up today. Some of the stunts, the special effects are pretty amazing. There's that documentary Raiders where it's about kids who try to recreate the movie like at home, and they actually do a pretty decent job of it. And I know this was a huge movie at the time, and it really kind of launched Harrison Ford in showing that he could be more than Han Solo. So I figure it's a good movie to to get the excitement going. I'm sure a lot of applause breaks. It's just you just walk out of that movie pumped up. So that's why I went with that for action adventure.
That is 2 heavy hitters there with Die Hard and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Obviously you're not going to get too many complaints about either of those films. Dan, that makes me think though, like these were summer blockbusters in the 80s. And then I look back at the last 2 to 3 years of summer blockbusters, and man, have we had anything even remotely as good as those 2 films we just talked about?
Man, that's a good question. It's hard to say. I don't think so. I not in the last 2 to 3 years. It's hard because we're getting a lot of very similar movies where though they were 2 very distinct by themselves type of films. There are some that I don't want to say because it may be chosen. But I do think there are movies that have come out in the summer that maybe have not been the biggest hits recently that will actually be more and more respected as years come on. So
that's true. That could definitely be a possibility. But all right, so we start with Die Hard and Raiders of the Lost Ark. That means it's your turn to decide what genre we go to next.
Well, I'm going to go with the genre I had the most difficulty with because it's not a genre I know a huge amount about, and that's the horror thriller category.
All right.
And you don't necessarily, I think, when you think summer, think horror. We are seeing some horror movies. I know recently They Come at Night came out this past year, and we do get like, some summer movies here and there. I even think Blair Witch was released in the summer. I forget, but there have been some more successful than others. You know, they don't just relegate those to October. As we mentioned, I think we get more horror movies in January than any other month. But I'm gonna go with, to me, one of the greatest. It's kind of cheating because I'm going with some really major movies, but hey, that's what we're trying to get the most people to come. Going with another major, all-time great, with Alien from 1979, which I honestly didn't realize came out in the summer until I was doing this list. Yeah, directed by Ridley Scott, of course, starring Sigourney Weaver as Ripley, and it to me is horror. It is horror in the best ways possible, because it gets there eventually. It's not attempting really to scare at the beginning, but it's gradual. And I know we've seen a lot of attempts at this franchise recently, maybe less successful than others, though I like Prometheus. But I've not seen the most recent remake. But I'm going to go with the original, where it all started. And I think it really holds up today. And I think even for a modern audience, they would really appreciate it, even if they've never seen it before. So that's why I went with for horror thriller. But what did you go with?
Yeah, Alien was one of that first. It started the summer that year, I think, in 1979, because it was a very late May release. So I mean, that was how you kicked off your summer back then. And Dan, I think this is a testament to the fact that you and I are not horror aficionados, because I only had I had a few more way down the list, but I basically had 3 options for this one, and you just picked one of them. And one of my other options is too close to yours, so I was like Aliens, or my third choice. So I'm going to go with the third choice, because otherwise my festival is going to seem too much like yours. So, and I'm also going to go back into the 70s for the first time, and a June release back in 1975. I think maybe one of the godfathers of this genre in a way. I'm going to go with Jaws. So, Jaws from June 20th, 1975. I think that's, it's to this genre almost what Godfather is to the mob genre or things like that. I think a lot of films since then have kind of drawn upon what happened and what occurred, what they were able to take from Jaws. So, and come on, nobody ever says anything bad about it. I do need to rewatch this a couple more times, because I've seen it a very limited number of times. But you can't go wrong with Jaws. So I think you have a little bit of horror there. You have a little bit of thriller. And like many horror films, it spawns a whole franchise of them. So there's obviously multiple entrants into that franchise as well. So surprised that they haven't tried to go back to Jaws in the last little bit, especially with all the shark hubbub that we get every year, with Shark Week and different things like that. They somewhat left Jaws alone. So I guess we got a few similar type of films. We get The Shallows last year, which I guess is a similar idea, but hey, they're all imitators, and they're not replicating what we got with Jaws in 1975.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say it was the first ever summer blockbuster, so it certainly belongs on. Unless it was on, I was thinking about picking it as well, but I already went to Spielberg, so I didn't want to make it the Spielberg Fest. So I think you arguably could do this entire thing with just Spielberg movies. I think that'd be quite easy. So yeah, I've recently watched that a few times, but specifically when I was going through all Spielberg's movies, writing reviews on them, and it's a great film. And it's funny because you mentioned the sequels, but I think a lot of people don't even know there are sequels. I feel like they've been forgotten by a good number of people that they even exist.
Right.
And I think it is funny that we haven't seen a reboot, but really haven't seen. Well, I should say we haven't seen many of Spielberg's movies kind of revisited. But then Crystal Skull exists, so then maybe
no, it
not.
doesn't.
So. No, it doesn't. Exactly.
All right. I think for my next one, I am going to go to sci-fi fantasy genre. Not because this one's hard, I guess, but just because I have one that I don't necessarily want it to be stolen. But man, this is like the gold mine here when you go to Summer Blockbusters and sci-fi fantasy, because there's so many to choose from, so many truly classic films, iconic franchise films, or just a lot of Spielberg stuff and different things. So I was almost actually thinking of putting one of the Indiana Jones films in here, but I went a different route. I'm going to go for my sci-fi fantasy film into the year of 1985. So another 80s. So I guess two 80s and one 70 so far. But I'm going to go to July 3rd, 1985 for Back to the Future because I love that film. I love that franchise. And to me, that is like what I want in a science fiction film. You know, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with the more serious, you know, dealing with some heavy issues and stuff like that, but this is just a good old fun. Like when I think of Summer Blockbuster, I'm going to think of more of a science fiction film like Back to the Future that also has a good deal of comedy and just a good time at the theater where you can just have fun with you know, your whole family basically, but it's science fiction or fantasy, so I'm picking that in this genre.
Yeah, I mean, can't go wrong with Back to the Future. I'm assuming you're going with the first one, right?
Yes. Yeah, Back to the Future from 1985.
Yeah. Though I really like the second movie. The third one has problems, but Back to the Future 2, I think, is nearly as good as the first. Maybe. I don't know. Some people may disagree with that. But, yeah, all-time great. It's one of the... To me, Back to the Future just personifies what it means to be fun in the theater. It's just, like, ultimately a watchable movie, so...
I think that fits with Summer Blockbuster, because that's what you're looking for when you do that. You're looking for the fun films.
For sure, and I guess mine for this like wasn't fun, but I'm also like trying to think about. I don't just want all 80s films. I don't want just 70s. I do want some current stuff, but I wanted to get something current that maybe not enough people have watched. And when you talked about, you know, is there a movie as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark? And I don't know if this was as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it was I think a trillion times better than I ever expected. Going into it, and that's well, it depends on who you talk to, but it's Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat. Nice. I think one, like I said, a lot of people need to see this that haven't. It's a movie that really benefits from rewatching with the kind of Groundhog Day plot line. And it's, you know, Tom Cruise. I think he is one of the perennial summer movie people that, you know, with all the different franchises he's been in. So I figured I wanted to get one of his movies in here someplace. And I think this movie, I think I've liked more and more the more I think about it, the more I go back to it. And I think it might stand up as one of the best summer movies that we've had in the last few years. It's so well directed, so great action. Great. I love how they kind of flip the head of, you know, the typical archetype when it comes to the Tom Cruise character. Emily Blunt's fantastic in it as well. Amazing special effects, some crazy, insane action set pieces, and you know, it works really well. I know they've been talking about a sequel. I don't know how you can do a sequel. I'm fine if they never do one. I think it holds up on its own. I don't think you need to go any further. But that wasn't where I'm going for science for sci-fi.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. I think, again, like you were saying, that not enough people have given this film a chance yet, and I think it also came at a time where nobody was expecting that film to be good. I don't think. I think a lot of people just kind of went in with either zero expectations or maybe even some negative expectations, because there had been quite a few films of that ilk that had come out there in that last, 3 to 4 years leading up to that maybe were a little bit disappointing. So I think people were maybe judging this one based on previous films and didn't go see it. And I agree with you. Like, I saw it in the theater. I loved it. I've seen it since then, on video and loved it even more. And it does grow on you each and every time. And I think it is very well crafted, very well put together. From the writers, from the directors, everybody involved there. And like you said, Emily Blunt, man, I didn't really know who she was or didn't take her as serious before this. So it was kind of like a coming out party for me, for her. And Tom Cruise, he's one of those two that was kind of immersed in a bunch of films that were kind of hit or miss. And I think this one was a big hit. So I like that one as part of your sci-fi.
I think we should be talking trash more so about each other, though, right? If we're competing, I think we're being way too kind.
I'm saving that for the end.
Okay. All right. So we went into our horror thrillers, we went through our action adventures, we went through our sci-fi. I guess we're kind of going through this quickly. So maybe let's go with family films next, because that's tough, because it's challenging to find a good family film. There's so much kind of garbage family films. So, it's what qualifies as family. I don't know how you categorize this, if you included different things or not, but I did kind of, since we don't have an animated category, I did think, hey, I'm going to go animated here, and thinking, okay, what's a family animated film that does appeal to a hugely wide audience? And I thought maybe Toy Story, but that didn't really come out in the summer from what I could see. And thought of other Pixar movies, and there's some really great Pixar movies, but there's some that I'm like, I don't know if they're going to work for kids as much as they do for adults. But one of them that I think that does work for kids, does work for adults, is also really a great film. Still remains one of Pixar's best films, and that's Finding Nemo.
Nice.
So I went with that. Again, staying with the summer theme. In a way, dealing with fish in the ocean and things of that nature. So I think it's a really good summer movie in that end. Like I said, it does appeal to all audiences. It's just a really well-crafted film. I actually just rewatched this. We got it through our Disney Movie Pack thing, whatever you want to call it, Movie Club. And I don't know, it was a very long time since I watched it for the first time. And it was just like, wow, I don't think I even appreciated it as much as I did. And I'm like, wow, this is such a well-crafted, well-told story. And it's Pixar at its best. Finding Dory, not so much, but Finding Nemo, pretty amazing. So that's why I went for it for my family film.
I like it. I was so tempted to go animated here because I was like, family, and one of the first things I think of when you're a kid is watching animated films and stuff like that. So I very much thought about it, but I'm like, that's what I always do when it comes to this category. Yeah. So I'm like, I have to avoid it. And there was a couple films that just bounced off the page at me when I'm thinking family, and I think I would be. I feel bad because I have a lot of 80s picks, but I would be hypocritical if I didn't go with this film. I own clothing that has this film on it, like 3 shirts that has this film represented on it, and I think it is fun. I showed it to my niece and nephew, probably like 3-4 years ago when they were both under the age of probably 10 or 12, and they liked it, and this was decades after it aired. So I got to go with Goonies for family. 1985, June 7th was the release date. I just can't think of anything else that's more fun for just all ages when it comes to like a family film, because I think there's some elements that adults can get, and there's a lot of elements that the kids would like. There's all kinds of fun gadgets and gizmos, and it is an adventure, so you kind of get that summer fun going on as well, and a lot of young stars in it, some that had found success, some that didn't, but I love Goonies, and it's just iconic, so I had to go with Goonies. I was very tempted to go with E.T. Or an animated film, but in the end I have to be true to myself and go with Goonies.
Interesting. Goonies never die. Good. See, I feel like there's like a big contingent that is like anti-Goonies. There's a very big anti-Goonies contingent out there that are saying it's overrated and not very good. And it's interesting that you say that your nieces and nephews did really enjoy it, because I do wonder that, because it is very much an 80s movie in a lot of ways. But I do think, and it's certainly, you talk about the clothing, and it is. It's so popular. I remember when I worked at Macy's, and there would be so many Goonies shirts and stuff like that. It's just one of those movies that just.
I've always wondered
huge
why.
Audience is still, like, iconography that still exists. Like, hey, you guys, and so.
Yeah, I always wondered why so that movie out of so many 80s movies gets the most treatment when it comes to. I don't know if it's just because of the logo with the skull and different stuff like that, or what it is, but for some reason, like, that is a go-to film when it comes to like the pop culture clothing and the shirts and the stuff like that. I don't get it, but whatever.
You don't see like much like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids like stuff,
right.
And I felt like they were around the same type of level.
Or Gremlins, like you don't even get that many Gremlin shirts, do you? I haven't seen one.
No. You can't worry about the midnight. That's the problem.
That's probably. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
So that means we're down to one more category, which just leaves us with comedy. I am so torn on what to do with comedy because I picked way too many 80s films, and I had an 80s comedy at the top of my list here too. But I want to go with something a little bit more recent, so I'm going to switch it up and go with my second choice, which is from the decade of the 2000s. And I'm going to go with, I'm so tempted because there was 2 films that came out in July, one in 2005 and one in 2008, that I still think are 2 of the best all-around comedies that we got in that entire decade. And when it comes to just like straight on comedy, not like a drama that's funny or you know what I mean, like some of it seems like every year I'm tending more to go with a film that's not necessarily 100% comedy as my favorite comedy of the year. And but back then these were 100% comedies. I'm gonna go with Step Brothers from July 25th, 2008. Just outdoing Wedding Crashers a little bit for me. So I just think it's two hilarious individuals being allowed to just do themselves and do their own thing. And I thought it was hilarious watching them play off of each other. I can watch it a number of different times. Like I said, I think it's one of the funniest films of the 2000 decade. So I'm going with Step Brothers. I think it's endlessly quotable. It was very iconic at the time and talked about, and I think it still holds up for me, at least. So that's my comedy pick.
It's interesting because I felt like when that came out, it was kind of, I don't know, panned, but it was just like whatever. But it's grown in so much. I feel like I hear it referenced all the time, and I was hesitant to go to it because I'm like, I like Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, but it was like that was like the 8th movie they did together. I'm like, I don't know if I could really see them in another movie, but I think arguably it's their best. Interesting. I do think it is a certain sense of humor. So it's something I know a lot of people just like reject Will Ferrell. I think Will Ferrell can be kind of annoying, but he can also be really funny. Right. Especially with John C. Reilly, who is funny whatever he wants to be. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it might not be something all around comedy that just everybody's gonna appreciate, but I had to get out of the 80s, and that's my way out.
Well, you getting out of the 80s, I'm gonna go back in the 80s. I purposely am like. That was one thing. I'm like, there's so many great 80s summer comedies. There's so many places you can go, to Airplane, to actually, National Lampoon's Vacation. It does seem like the perfect, list here, things for this. But I feel like that's almost kind of rides in line a family film as well. But I got to go with it. I thought it'd be chosen by now because it could fit into a lot of the different categories. I thought someone would take it. But since you haven't, I will go ahead and take Ghostbusters as my comedy. It's Bill Murray, one of the greatest comedies ever, genre mashups ever made. It's got some, again, you talked about a movie that you still see everywhere. And I know I don't even want to get into the most recent remake or what have you, but the original film I think is pretty fantastic. I still think it's hilarious. A lot to do with Bill Murray and Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd back when he was still funny. It's Ghostbusters. I think I know there was like a pushback a few years ago when people were like it's not as good as people say it is. I don't know. I still think it's a great movie, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I agree. And Dan, it was written down on my sheet of paper. So I had Step Brothers, Wedding Crashers, National Lampoon's Vacation, and Ghostbusters as my 4 that I was trying to choose between. I was very tempted to go with National Lampoon's Vacation just because of the vacation theme and the summer theme like you mentioned, but I was definitely highly considering Ghostbusters. So interesting. What films were you considering that you weren't able to fit into your genres before we recap our 5 films?
See, I kind of stayed away from superhero movies. I thought about adding them, but like Dark Knight, Guardians of the Galaxy were ones I thought about adding. Other Pixar films, Toy Story 3. I really wanted to fit Mad Max in there, Fury, but I ended up going with Raiders. I was going back and forth between those two, but that's why I went more modern with my science fiction pick because I thought that would fit a little bit better. For family, I also almost went Parenthood,
okay.
But it's also like a movie. I don't know if it's really a family film per se. So it's more of a dramedy, and so it couldn't really fit into any specific category. Animal House I thought about, but I'm not the hugest fan of it, so I'd be lying. And the most recent, I was also thinking about the most recent Star Trek film, the reboot, the first one, and I love that movie. I think it's. I think that's a really, in a way, it's kind of getting forgotten with all the other additional sequels, but I still really enjoy the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a few, too, that I didn't mention already. Obviously, I mentioned, Vacation and Ghostbusters, which didn't pick for comedy, and E.T., which I didn't pick for family. Action-adventure, I was also thinking Speed from 94 to try to get a 90s film in there, but ultimately had to go with Die Hard. And I didn't have really any other horror thriller picks as we talked about, so I was glad that Aliens and Jaws. I was afraid that you were going to go, maybe Jaws with a horror and then pick Alien as like a sci-fi fantasy, and then I was going to have no picks for horror thriller. So I was glad that worked out. I did have a couple other options for sci-fi fantasy: Terminator 2: Judgment Day from '91 or Jurassic Park from '93. I think those both fit the bill pretty well as summer blockbusters. But ultimately had to go with the fun Back to the Future pick. So why don't you recap your festival? What is it going to look like if someone's interested in buying a ticket?
So yeah, I'm thinking of like how will this open? I feel like you always start with a family film, right? First, so I'm gonna go start with that of Finding Nemo. Let the kids have their fun, enjoy it. And then I think after that, you still want something that's somewhat family friendly. So that's when I would go into Raiders. I think most ages can appreciate that. Then you had your action adventure. Contrast that with a nice comedy for you need a little comedic break, I think, and then that's when Ghostbusters would drop. Have your fun comedy, a little bit lighter, then get into Aliens, or Alien, I should say, because that's the movie I picked. And then the end of the show, ending with the most recent film. I'd go with Edge of Tomorrow. I think it'd be interesting seeing Alien and Edge of Tomorrow back to back, just different takes on science fiction. That way you kind of, and on a lighter note, I think it's not super light, but it's at least, I think, more of the adventure. I don't think you would want to end with Alien and be scared that you're going to be chased by a xenomorph the entire time. So anyways, basically, I have Alien, Finding Nemo, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Edge of Tomorrow, and lastly, Ghostbusters.
All right. I think I was going to start the same way you did it with a family-friendly film, just in case the kids are only going to be there for the first part. I don't know. So I'm starting with Goonies. I think after that we got to get the pulse going a little bit. So I'm going to go right to Die Hard and get the kind of that action adventure, get everybody excited for the rest of the trip. And then after that, I'll go ahead and go into Step Brothers. I guess I'm going back and forth trying to lighten it up and make it more intense. And then the final two, kind of the grand finale, I'm going to go with Jaws first, and then just so you're not scared going home, I'm going to end with Back to the Future as kind of the mea culpa of the whole festival with the celebratory Back to the Future finale. So, Goonies, Die Hard, Step Brothers, Jaws, and Back to the Future.
So your festival is going to end with a gigantic to be continued sign.
Yeah, because I want them to come back when I do my second festival with Back to the Future 2 as the first film. don't
and
shoot
Jaws
holes in
2 and
yeah, right. I can go all sequels after that. Looking at your list, it's a little bit interesting because I thought I had like a slam dunk with Die Hard, and then you pulled out Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I had seen. And for some reason, I didn't put down on my list. There was Indiana Jones and Star Wars. I forgot the fact that there was a Star Wars film that came out in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so cemented in my mind that those are December releases or December releases. But there's been some that have come out in the summer. So I was tempted to go with Indiana Jones or Star Wars. And then I just completely either forgot or kind of put it aside as that's all my whole festival is going to be those films.
See, I didn't want to go too obvious. I mean, I went pretty obvious with Alien and Raiders. I'm like, I could throw Star Wars in there, but I was like, I wanted at least a little bit, maybe something, that wouldn't be considered the biggest fanboy film. So, but yeah, I'm sure some people are like, no one picked Star Wars. That seems ridiculous.
Well, this is the inaugural summer film festival that we're throwing on here, so we can't just use all of our bullets, right? In the first one. So you'll have to go to the website and vote on which festival you would want to attend. If you can only attend one, they're going on at the same time, folks. Same day, same time. You can't attend both, so you have to decide which one you're going to go to. And I think we're going to show them across the street from each other, so you can see the lines forming at each festival and get jealous, or have to ramp up the excitement for it. Get on your social media and tell people to get on down to wherever this is being held. So go to the website www.geekcastradio.com and find the episode post. We will have the poll within the episode post there, and you can vote there on which festival you would more like to attend. Dan, thinking back just a little bit, I guess, in some final thoughts maybe, as we were talking about this summer blockbuster, I kind of made one little quick dig, I guess, at more recent times, but looking back at these last couple of years, what are the standouts, do you think? What kind of films that have come out in the summer these last, 2-3 years, do you think are most maybe worthy of being in a list like this maybe someday, or are most reflective of times of old where we had these, big summer blockbusters, and that was the kind of the excitement for the whole year was going to be those summer blockbusters. Any films that we've gotten here in the last 3, 4, 5 years that you think stand out?
3, 4, 5 years. That's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think of when Avengers came out, because it's like the first movie that kind of my mind goes to would be the Avengers, or Inception. I think is up there. I think people forget that was a summer film, but I think that it maybe on the line more of an Aliens or something like that. That is not a little heavier than your specific summer affair. Man, that's a good question. I don't.
Because I know, recently, at least the last couple of years, it's been, everybody's been dogging on the blockbusters. Last year we had things like Warcraft and the Independence Day resurgence film. We had the Ghostbusters reboot. We had a Star Trek sequel. You know what I mean? Like, we had a lot of stuff. The Jason Bourne film, which actually a lot of more people were anticipating, that didn't turn out so well. And, even when you go back to the year before, or some of those other years where you have like the Transformers fair, or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I don't know if those both came out in the summer, but Transformers usually does. So, a lot of films that people have kind of labeled the summer as more so failures, or the blockbusters have been the failures of the year. Do you think that's accurate given those films?
I think we've had some bad years. I think like one of the best summers, if we're just looking at kind of the most recent years, was like 2014. Because you look at some of the movies that came out that summer, you had Guardians of the Galaxy, which was great. And I think the movies that, and I should have even considered some of these, were the Apes films, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Absolutely.
I think that would be one that people, I think, is, even though it's a remake, I think arguably better than all the other Apes films up to this point. X-Men Days of Future Past, I know there's been a lot of X-Men movies, but that to me still is one of the best. So I think they are there. It's hard to Enter Tomorrow, like as mentioned, that was in 2014 as well. So I think we've had a good year here and there when you look back on it. But I don't know if we're having like the all-time greats. At least looking at 2016, 2015. Nothing really. I think we've had some really. We were seeing a little bit more of some of the better, like Straight Out of Compton. I think of last year, or 2 years ago, that came out during kind of the summer period, if I'm not mistaken, and that's not your typical summer film. But
right.
So I think we're seeing like a larger variety of movies come out during the summer, with depending on what your classification of summer, when it begins or not. So. I mean, like Winter Soldier, for example, that came out in like April, so I don't think that would necessarily count.
Yeah, and I think it seems like a couple of these years are just not good. 2013, we had the Lone Ranger. We had also with the Lone Ranger, R.I.P.D. The Wolverine. So I mean, yeah, there's been quite a few bad ones here and there. We did have Pacific Rim that year that came out in July. I know some people are higher on that film, and some people are like to rip on that. But that was a summer blockbuster back in 2013. But I don't know if we'll ever quite get back to kind of that thought process that we use when we think of things like the original Independence Day, which we didn't bring up kind of, I guess, in the conversation. That's kind of a prototypical summer blockbuster when people think about it. Jurassic Park, The Terminators, Aliens, Back to the Future, those films that we talked about. Because, like you said, number one, will spread out pretty far, it's the whole year type thing. And the combination of it just seems like a time right now where this is the time where everybody has to throw out stuff that's already connected to a franchise or a series, or, you know what I mean? It has to be that known property, it seems like, when it's coming out in the summer. The Turtles, the Transformers, the Pirates movies, that type of thing. So, I don't know. Will we ever get back to that, or will it just become a year-long thing where we get stuff hit and missed? And a lot of strategy these days goes into when you're going to release a film. You don't want them all to be packed into June and July, because then you all have to compete against each other. So I don't know if we'll ever quite get back to what we used to have.
Yeah, and I think usually when you have a Marvel movie come out, it's like, all right, studios wait at least like 2 to 3 weeks for that to be out, and then before they like release their next big thing, because they don't want, they don't want to like have that hitting into their opening weekend, because it's all about the opening weekend. So they try to position movies to the point where there's nothing within it for a period of time. Like you rarely see major movies up on the same weekend. When it does, it's pretty big. Like thinking of the weekend that we're recording this, the biggest movies are Cars 3 and The Book of Henry, which is just like a kind of a indie drama.
And speaking of what you were talking about with Straight Outta Compton, All Eyes on Me, I believe that's a release this week as well. The Tupac movie.
So there's not like that in itself. That you don't really have, you have Cars, which obviously is more of the family audience. I guess but there's no big, I say, like action, science fiction, fantasy movie coming out. You think it'd be a perfect opportunity to release something like that. But instead, people are basically, will go see Wonder Woman again, or for the first time if you're me, because I'm like the last person on earth who has not seen Wonder Woman yet. So I apologize, but I just haven't had the opportunity. So I think that's what we end up getting. I can't think of the next really big. We have Spider-Man coming up in a few weeks, and then and I think like every, let's say maybe 5 years or so, you get a really good summer. But I also think August tends to get some better movies than it used to. August used to be an awful dumping month, but Guardians came out in the summer. Suicide Squad came out in the summer too, so maybe that's not true. It came out in August too, so maybe that killed that. But they also, Suicide Squad also like cleaned up because it was like the only thing coming out in August. Right. So I think we'll see more and more movies released in August than used to be. So I think release dates don't matter as much anymore. It's just, it's not time of year. It's just what else is being released around that time that really matters more.
Right. Like think about even, Christmas time. Now that there's a Star Wars film coming out every Christmas, you get, it's like that. And then you get some award caliber, Oscar bait type films. You're not going to get a bunch more blockbusters coming out around Christmas because people are going to stay away from that. I think the one thing that you can expect every summer is there is going to be at least one big animated film every summer. That seems to be something that's immune to all this other stuff because they don't have to compete with the same type of audience or the same movie-going crowd. So they aren't going to compete against each other a ton. So you're not going to see a big group of them. But we seem to at least get that one big animated film every summer. So I guess that is somewhat immune to these other things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we usually get a Pixar film. Typically, I think what we didn't, or sometimes they take a year off, or sometimes it's a Pixar film. I think this year's Pixar film, well, we get two this year, weirdly enough, because we have Cars, and then we get their apology for Cars 3, Coco, in November. It's like, we got to do one for them. Like, Disney wants the merchandise. I know, I have a 2-year-old. They love Cars. They just love them. I get why they do it. I understand it. It pays the bills, probably. But yeah, and then what we get, I think we get more and more animated movies ever, because I feel like, we have Despicable Me 3.
Right.
That franchise won't end. I feel like there's other animated movies coming out too. So yeah, I think we're getting a lot more. I think
just in
animated.
General, yeah. Instead of like you look back at like past years, if we were doing this, you have like one, maybe two a year that you would be able to talk about. And now it seems like within this last decade or so, it's like 5 a year. If you don't have at least a slate of 4 to 6 good animated titles or at least big names, it's like, what's going on? Is it an off year for all the studios, or what's going on here?
And I think too, what we've lost with that, now we have animated films, but I feel like when we were growing up, or at least we had a lot of those like kid like movies that involved kids. Like I'm thinking of like all the sports film movies from The Sandlot and The Mighty Ducks. They have like all those. I don't feel like I see a lot of that. Like Heavyweights, I saw on Netflix the other day. I was watching that. I was looking at a lot of the movies that come out. I mean, there's like one or two, like Diary of the Wimpy Kid or whatever, but there are very few, I feel like, family films anymore. When doing this category, I was looking at the family films that have come out in like the last 10 or so years. Like that genre has really dried up in the sense of it's just animated, and that's in some really bad like Hallmark movies or some My Dog Skip. Yeah, so like that. I don't know why that's happened, because I feel like those movies did well. but we don't get those anymore.
Yeah, if you think about it, like you said, all the Sandlots or like all the different baseball films, like Angels in the Outfield, Rookie of the Year, those types of things. I talked about Goonies. Obviously, you had like I know Home Alone was more of a Christmas film, but I mean we had a lot of films with kid main characters or a group of kids, and I can't think of that many either. Besides the few like we've got a couple like Disney Channel type shows that have had a movie about them or something like that, but it doesn't seem like the big hits that they were once upon a time. So I don't know if that's just a product of times or if they feel like there's not an audience. But you're right. It seems like instead we have all these animated films coming at us left and right. So interesting how the summer has changed over the years for sure. Anything else, Dan, that you wanted to talk about as far as summer or final thoughts as far as the blockbuster season? Anything you're still looking forward to this summer blockbuster season?
Yeah, my most anticipated movie still hasn't come out yet with War for the Planet of the Apes, so I'm super stoked for that still, and I'm actually so that's kind of what I'm hoping. I'm really hoping Spider-Man: Homecoming is good. I don't know what to think of it just because it's Sony still there in the background that worries me, and then their plans for what they want to do scare me a little bit. And I still want to see Wonder Woman. See, I've heard great things. I have not. So I don't know. How about you? Anything you're still looking forward to?
I mean, I think obviously with War for the Planet of the Apes, that was my number 2 most anticipated film of the year. Your number 1. So been waiting for that one, and every time I see a trailer, I have the same reaction. I'm just as excited, or if not more excited. Amanda's worried because she thinks she's going to be very sad during that film. She doesn't like to see any of the deaths that sometimes happen to different characters, and good chance with the War for Planet of the Apes that we're going to see some of that. So she's worried she's going to be a blubbery mess. But yeah, I'm still very much excited for that. I know she's looking forward to Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets from Luc Besson. I'm not as high on that one. I'm hopeful for Spider-Man: Homecoming, like you mentioned, and then kind of getting into the first part of August and the last part of summer, we have The Dark Tower coming out, which I've heard people excited, heard people not excited, but I'm still looking forward to seeing Idris Elba on screen. So hopefully it's not a train wreck. So I think those are probably the biggest ones. You talk about animated films. Another one coming out still yet this summer, the Emoji Movie, because that needs to be a thing.
It's interesting seeing people interviewed for that movie that are in it. They all seem kind of like, I can't believe I'm in this movie called the Emoji Movie. It's like they lost a bet in that, and they had to do a voice for it, or they're just like, why not? It's just like Patrick Stewart is doing a voice for the Emoji. It's just crazy world we live in.
I guess they know that there's a paycheck when it comes to those animated films. So you'll have to let us know what you think about summer films, the tradition of a summer blockbuster. Is it a thing of the past? Is it something that still exists? We just got to sift through some other, crap to get to it. What else are you excited for this summer? Let us know all those things by interacting with us on Twitter. The show handle there is at Cinema Geekcast. You can also interact with us individually. My Twitter handle is at OptimusSolo. Dan, what's yours?
I'm at MovieRevolt.
And of course, we have a couple series still going on. We have one movie left in the Miyazaki spotlight, so we still have to talk about Wind Rises, which will be coming very soon. And then, of course, we'll wrap up the entire Hayao Miyazaki spotlight. We're trudging forward in the video game spotlight as well. We'll have next out for that series will be the Dead or Alive film, so it'll be interesting to get everybody's take on that one. And we have a couple episodes left going to our top 100 films of all time, so we're getting to the nitty-gritty on that list as well. Next time, Matt and Amanda will be back to join us in those various spotlights. Definitely keep an eye out for those episodes when they drop. All right, that is it for us for this week. Tune in next week for another chance to listen to the Cinema Geeks.